Welcome to the Untold Story podcast, everybody. This is one of our favorite podcasts to do. It's the end of the year. We're almost at Christmas, and we're doing favorite books and books that you might want to consider as gifts for your friends and family. So I'm joined by somebody who's no stranger to any of you, the co-host of America's Newsroom, co-host of The Five, host of the great podcast, Perino On Politics, and best-selling author of Everything Will Be Okay, and of course, my friend, Dana Perino. Hi, Dana.
Hi, this is our annual book episode.
It's very exciting. So Dana
I can't believe it's been a year.
I can't either. And Dana is just one of the best sources for new books, and she reads voraciously. So she'll tell you, like, this one's really not that good. This one's really good. This one is very special. So I'm excited for her to go through her list. And we're going to kind of tag team, because I have some that are in the nonfiction category that I want to share with you as well that I'm excited about. So welcome, Dana.
Thanks. I had an okay reading year.
Okay.
I think last year I had a great reading year. And this year, maybe it was because of the election and I was so busy, or just like book selection choice. I didn't hit it right all the time. I did come up with the top 6 here for this, and one to look for in 2025, because I got to read the galley. But I found myself in the last 2 months doing something I hardly ever do, which is getting about 100 pages in and saying, I'm not going to finish this. It's terrible. Put it down. And I never say what those books are, because somebody else might love them.
Right.
So I'm never going to say that, but I will tell you the ones that I really liked.
That was going to be a question of mine for you. Do you ever just say, I'm not going to finish this? I do. I think that, time is so precious. And if you aren't loving it, 100 pages, I think, is a good test for any book. Also, do you keep a list of the books that you read each year?
Yes.
And how many books do you read a year? So many. I know.
In my notes app, I have books read in 2024. So I just keep a list like that. Mm-hmm. So I just, and this includes books I listen to as well.
Yeah.
So what I've typically been doing right now is I mostly just read fiction, not solely, but pretty much in my free time, because I feel like news is
your nonfiction.
But I listen to nonfiction, but also fiction. I found some gems on that in that category as well. So I keep a list here, and then I go through, and I don't really, as you can see, I'm just showing Martha on my phone. I don't say how I liked it or not. I just sort of remember.
Right.
I hope.
Yeah.
But one of the things I do have to do is go like, wait, why did I like that book? I will tell you one book this is the only one I'll tell you. This book, All Fours, I can't remember who wrote it. She's from Brooklyn, I think. I could not stand that book. That book got so much sort of hype and media hype, and all my girlfriends are reading it. And I'm like, wait, this was just like kind of an excuse for this middle-aged woman to write porn. And I couldn't stand it. I did finish it. I didn't wait for 100 pages. I did finish that book. And then I was hearing from people like, oh, it's a very controversial book. Like, some people hated it, some people loved it. Like, if we went to a book club in Brooklyn tonight, I'm sure people were like, oh, that book was so amazing. I'm like, no, she was a terrible person. The character in this book is a terrible person. And I did not even think it was that well written. So sometimes I feel like I have a different viewpoint. But pretty much, I think that the consensus of what I will suggest for these are really good. But I don't read enough nonfiction.
Well, I have always been basically fixated on nonfiction. I read a lot of history. And as you say, we read so much for work. I don't know how you manage to read all of those books in your free time, because you put so much time into your research for work as well. So, but let's hear your first pick.
My first pick. Okay. I love this book, and I think you would love this book too. So it was called The Trackers. And I think it was Charles Frazier wrote this book. And do you remember, what was the book that Charles Frazier wrote that everybody loved? And everyone, I'm going to look it up.
Yes, I know
right
what
now.
it was.
And it was historical fiction.
It was like
Cold Mountain.
Cold Mountain.
So Charles Frazier, anytime I see an author who wrote something that I loved, I was like, oh, I gravitate.
Yeah.
That's how authors become famous. So this book takes place in the 30s. So it's during the Depression. Mm-hmm. And it took place in a location that's very special to me, which is near where my mom grew up in Rawlins, Wyoming. And it's about a Depression-era painter. And he gets a commission to paint a mural
I love it already.
And he goes there and he meets this couple, and there's this a beautiful young woman married to more of a rich guy, and there's like a connection there, but then she runs away, and then he is asked by the man who is the richer guy, would he take a break from his painting to go try to track her down? And it's a little bit like a travel log and a little bit mystery, and it moves so well. The dialogue is so great. Van Welch is his name. But one of the things I really learned about was about the New Deal and these art commissions. And sometimes you'll go to these, Midwestern towns. Those have to be Midwestern town. You might show up at a town like, oh, that's nice, that's beautiful, or that's interesting. And you realize that one of the things that the Roosevelts did was say, we have to, 1, jobs. Number 2, how do we beautify? How do we make things lovely? And the care with which he paints and brings the community into it is really great. I loved it. I loved everything about it.
I love that theme because one of the things I love when we travel for elections is going to city halls and state capitals and looking at the artwork on the walls, because they're just this amazing embodiment of the movement forward across the country and the pride that people took in building these new cities as they moved westward. It's one of in Iowa, at the state capitol is some of the most beautiful murals that just completely capture the move west. And so I just love that idea. I would just mention that if you're in New York, yesterday I was walking by Rockefeller Center, and the reliefs on the sides of Rockefeller Center are exactly what you're talking about. And they have these sort of ethics and things to live by. It's like philosophy, religion, hygiene, it says. Just these ideas. And
hygiene?
Beautiful, yes, it's one of them. Religion, hygiene, athleticism, all of these great sort of ideals all over the sides of the walls of Rockefeller Center. So, okay.
So I really think that you would like that. And Charles Fraser, he does not disappoint. Really great writer of dialogue, too.
You know what? I'm going to sneak in a nonfiction pick here that also has to go with New York, because this is like a coffee table book, but I loved it. It's called Rosario Candela and the New York Apartment, and it's by David Netto, who's a really interesting designer. And it's about the birth of the classical apartment building in Manhattan. Really interesting subject. So these were built mostly for wealthy people. They're on Park Avenue, and 740 Park is his sort of seminal work. They're on Fifth Avenue, Sutton. But it really gives you a different perspective when you're walking down the street in New York to look up at these buildings and understand this architect, Candela, who really laid out like classic apartments. So in New York, for those of you who don't live there, there's a lot of apartments that are like, oh, this used to be a something else, and it's all carved up and, made into these different spaces. But these are just beautifully laid out, designed for living in the city, designed to capitalize architecturally on the light that's coming in the windows. And they have really generous ceilings, and they're just so beautiful to look at. And all these famous people lived in this building. And David Netto did a great tribute to Candela in his recognition of the architecture, and then also the interior design. So it's a really cool.
Isn't it so interesting to get invited every once in a while? And it's only been a few times since I've lived in New York to get to go to one of those apartments.
Yes,
and you walk in like, oh,
this is how
this is not like how I live.
Exactly.
Yeah, not at all how I live. And I did get to go to one. I remember those big ceilings. Built in the day when the kitchen was separate.
Right.
It's not a big open kitchen plan. Now, some have been remodeled and they have that
apartment probably right behind the kitchen. Yes.
I got to go to one and they did have staff. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And she had beautiful art on the walls, and I love that. That sounds great.
It's a beautiful book. I highly recommend it.
So then my next one goes really well with that, and I think you would like this as well. I love historical fiction, and what's interesting is another book on here is a little bit more of recent. It's considered historical fiction. It takes place in the 70s. but this one, it takes place in the 30s and 40s, and it's called Fifth Avenue Glamour Girl. And it's based on the story of Estee Lauder and how she grew up in New York, how she started her business making cosmetics in a sink. Yep. And how she worked her butt off. But she was a complicated person. And her relationship with her husband was complicated. And I also realized in the book that I've been saying her name wrong my whole life. It's Estee.
I know, because we always said Esty.
I said Estee because I thought the accent was
Estee Lauder. You know, when I grew up, my grandmas used to have like Estee Lauder lipstick in their bags, and my mom, and I always thought it was Estee, but it's Estee.
No, it's Estee. You're correct.
Oh, it is Estee.
I was saying it Estee my whole life.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had it wrong. And
that's cool.
It was just interesting to learn about a woman at that time who was like, I'm going to make it. And to think like everything's working against you. Yep. And it's hard. And basically she's just trying to break in. Like, how could she get her cosmetics to be sold at the counter? That was the big deal, right? At Bloomingdale's or Saks. Saks is the one that she really wants. And I know my friend Kevin Warsh is married to one of the Louders. I don't know if you know her. Jane. And I don't know them well. I know Kevin pretty well. And I think, wow, what this woman did in the 30s, walking around. And like she would create little bags for people. She'd go to Florida, to Palm Beach, and she would meet somebody there at the party and say, oh, do you have a moment? I think like we could just like help with a little bit of blush right here, and I'll show you how to put it on. And she did also seem to really care about how other people looked and how women felt about themselves. And the brand lives on. It's pretty amazing.
I totally agree. I think she's a fascinating person. I did a mini documentary on her years ago when I was at CNBC.
Oh, wow.
And I think she's fascinating. And she would just, you know, spray her perfume on people and be like, you know, wouldn't you like to try this? I think she was probably the first person who did that when you walked through the store, the free sample. And they have built an empire.
And you know that what was the guy that wrote the book a couple of years ago, the business book, Louder? He works for the company. He was the one who came up with two really interesting things in beauty. Free gift with purchase.
Ronald. It's not Ronald.
No, it was the other one.
Okay.
I'll look it up in a second. Free gift with purchase was one of his marketing ideas. And also cutting diagonally the lipstick.
Oh,
it used to just be flat,
right?
And a lot of lipsticks still are just
like
flat
lips. Yeah,
he was the one who said, "Let's
that's so interesting." Yeah, it's a fascinating company. And of course, then they bought Clinique. They bought like all these other brands and made them part of the Lauder empire, which is an incredible. You know, it's been an incredible.
Is it Leonard?
Business. Leonard Lauder.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
He wrote a wonderful business book, nonfiction. I actually read that one. And one thing I took away from that book, I'll never forget it, is he was in charge of advertising. And for his whole career, he had always made sure that he was the last eyes to approve the advert. And one time he didn't do it. And it was a double page in a New York Times colored thing, and something was wrong with it. I can't remember, something was wrong. And it was the one he didn't check. And he said that. So you always, as the boss, you own that.
Yes.
That's why when people come say like, well, I didn't tweet that, you know, I'm not responsible for that tweet because my staffer did it. I'm like, no, that doesn't work.
I couldn't agree more.
Accountability.
I couldn't agree more. I remember when I was growing up, the Estee Lauder models, like Karen Graham was this beautiful model, and they would pick one person and stick with that person for several years, like to be the face. Carolyn Murphy became one later on. And it just it's a really interesting company to study. So that's a
Fifth Avenue glamour girl
suggestion. I love that. The Untold Story continues right after this. One other book that I would put in here, which I've just started. There's two on here that I just started, but I already really love them. Peggy Noonan's A Certain Idea of America, which is a really great compilation of different writings from people just making observations about America. There's a great one in here about the importance of the office, which is a personal passion of mine. You know, the workplace and not working from home, actually being with the people you work with. So Peggy is such a gifted writer. Obviously, everyone knows that, and this is a really wonderful compilation, which I think is a great gift too.
So I did a books event with her for this book just like 3 weeks ago, the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And she came down to Bay Head, and one of the things we talked about is a lot of these columns in here are a lot of her non-political works. And she, 2 years ago, undertook to read War and Peace. And I remember reading that column going, oh my gosh, I know that's a huge commitment. But the column is so beautiful. And in the middle of our conversation at the bookstore, I'm like, wait, is the War and Peace column in here? And it is. So
great.
there's some great works in there, and she has beautiful stories about working with Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, she does.
That are amazing. If you want a quick read and a fabulous read, there's a book called First Lie Wins, and this is about a Southern girl. She has everything she wants, and her. That's Evie Porter. She is the Southern girl. She has everything she wants. The only catch is that Evie Porter doesn't actually exist. It's a made-up woman. And the idea of first lie wins is that everyone's lying. And everyone thinks they told the first lie. But as you get deeper into the story, you realize that they didn't.
Yeah.
And what I loved about this book was I read it in one day. The stakes are high for all of these people that are involved. And at the end, I always like to read about the author. And this woman had been a wedding planner and had an idea for like a young adult book, had a little bit of success with that. This book is in like the top 10 lists of all at the end of 2024. People love this book because it was such a good read, and it's being turned into a movie. I think Reese Witherspoon bought it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So congrats to her. First Lie Wins.
What's your next one?
I have another one. This is the one that's the historical fiction in the late 60s, early 70s. Yeah. And I think you would love this book. It's called All the Summers in Between. And it's about two girls that there's a local girl that lives in the Hamptons, and she lives there full time. And then there's Margot, and Margot comes just for the summers. And they are really good friends, best friends. And they have all sorts of things that happen to them all the summers in between. It's just a coming of age story of women during a pretty transformative era.
Yeah, absolutely.
You could say, for girls and women, and thinking about how to be independent in this new era. And they work at a record store.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, so it was pretty fun.
Which was just a hub of excitement in those years before every piece of your music was living on your phone. Actually, Lucas Tomlinson encouraged me to go back and read The Guns of August earlier this year. And Barbara Tuchman's one of my favorite writers. A Distant Mirror is one of my favorite books about the Middle Ages. And Guns of August is an amazing... it's so beautifully written. She's such a great writer. And whoever did the audiobook sounds like like you would imagine Barbara Tuchman sounds. But it's all about all of the heads of state of the countries in Europe who were interrelated heading into World War I, and the sort of egos at work and the tragic things really that led to World War I. And it was just obviously such a different era where information wasn't relayed the way it is now, and sort of the tragic sequence of events that led to World War I. But it's amazingly written and just so rich. It's like a rich tapestry of history is The Guns of August.
Love that. I wrote it down. Okay. Another one is Maggie O'Farrell is a Scottish writer, one of my very, very favorites. She wrote The Marriage Portrait, and she also wrote Hamnet.
Oh, yes.
And
I liked Hamnet.
Hamnet was fabulous.
Yeah.
And it's very loosely based on Shakespeare
yes.
and his wife. And I loved it. So, again, I see this novel by Maggie O'Farrell I haven't heard about. And it's from a few years ago. I think it's 07 or 08. And I thought this was such a dazzling piece of work and so complex. And the characters are so interesting. Like the main character woman, you just want to meet her. She's a very famous actress and so beautiful and exceedingly private. And something happens in her life as she just snaps. And she's like, I never want to be seen again. And she takes her young son and she moves to this place in Ireland. And somebody comes along and he's been given directions. And he goes, oh, this must be the place. And they develop a relationship, and then they kind of go all over the world. They come back to New York and back and forth. But it's really about family, identity, the atmosphere of living in this really remote place in Ireland, and also about forgiveness. It's very sophisticated. I thought it was, well, it got all sorts of acclamations, and it deserved all of them. Now, a couple of friends of mine took me up on the suggestion and were like, Dana, what are you talking about?
Really?
This book is so complicated.
That's what's so personal about
it's so weird. I'm like, but it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And now a lot of books that I read are sad. They're like, it's so sad. I'm like, yeah, great fiction is usually sad, and it teaches empathy.
Absolutely.
And so, yes, a lot of books are sad.
Yes.
Now, First Lie Wins, not that sad. It's like, wow, exhilarating and fun. But like the books that stayed with me are ones like that one. This Must Be the Place. Fabulous.
Oh, good. I know last time you allowed me to take that list home with
you
me.
can have
That's
it.
why I'm not furiously scribbling down all of your great suggestions. I also read and interviewed for a podcast. Garrett Graff wrote When the Sea Came Alive, because this year we did the 80th anniversary of Normandy, which was an incredible experience. I would encourage anybody who has the opportunity to visit Normandy, and especially if you could ever get a chance to do it on June 6th. It's an extraordinary experience. We did it back in on the 75th, 5 years ago, and it's an amazing anthology, I guess is what you would call it, of voices, real voices that are compiled, diary entries from so many people that were involved in the in Operation Overlord. And so you just read it, through. You've got Eisenhower, you've got Churchill, you have all of these smaller players, individual people who landed on the beaches. All their voices are kind of woven through this amazing story, and it's called When the Sea Came Alive by Garrett Graff.
Oh, Peter would love that.
Oh, it's so good.
Have you been listening to the Rest is History podcast?
I have.
It's good.
I just started listening to it, and I've been doing, I'm trying to think, Lord Nelson.
That's what Peter and I are in the middle of.
Isn't it great?
Well, I think it's cool because it's these two guys from Britain who are historians. There was a Wall Street Journal feature piece about them one weekend, and then I was like, maybe we should check it out. And we're going to Argentina, and they have a whole thing about Eva Perón.
Oh,
so
perfect.
we read that, or we listened to that, and then this one. And so that Garrett Graff one sounds excellent right now.
Absolutely.
I'm in a historical mood. This is my number one pick of the year.
Ooh, drum roll.
Maybe the decade.
Wow.
So much so that I tracked down the author and had to call and thank her for writing this book. I'm sure she was like, why is this person calling me?
I'm sure
she is a teacher, professor at Western State University in Colorado. When I was a kid growing up, if somebody went to Western State, we called it Wasted State. Like, I don't know anybody who ever graduated from there. That's hyperbole. But to have this gem of a writer finally get the recognition she deserves with this book, it is incredible. It is called Go as a River. Set in the 1950s, early 1950s. Again, there's a theme here. There's a lot of strong women being written about right now. And there's a town in Colorado that is about to be put underwater from it because of a dam that they're putting in. And there's a lot of angst in the community, as you can imagine. It's like this town's sort of dying. But the people still live there, and they have their farms there. And she, as a young girl, loses her mother in a car accident, and nothing is really ever the same for her. And this all happens in like the first chapter, so I'm not giving too much away. She meets a boy along her walks, and he apparently seems to be Native American or of mixed heritage. And she falls in love. They have one encounter. She gets pregnant. The brother had found out that she was with him, and there's a lot of racism in the day, and they kill him. And she leaves. And most of the book is about her in isolation and solitude, figuring out a way to survive on her own, pregnant, giving birth on her own, and then making a really tough decision about how to raise this child. And it is sad. It is so amazing. The way that I called her. I said, how did you think of this character? And get inside her head is so amazing. And for that time frame, too, in the 1950s. Yeah. It goes through until about right after the Vietnam War, or towards the end of the Vietnam War. There is a gentle ending to the book. So yes, it is sad. I'm not going to say it ends on a high note and everything's happy at the end, but there's a gentle ending that just took my breath away. It also just got picked up for a movie.
I was going to say, that sounds like it should be a movie. Oh, well, I'm definitely going to put that one on my list. I might buy it for my daughter because it sounds like something she would love too. The Untold Story continues right after this. So My last one is another compilation of American stories, and it's been around. I think it was published in 2011, and Peggy Noonan actually recommended it when she talked about her book, and it's called What So Proudly We Hail by Leon and Ann Cass, who are professors, and they put together this extraordinary compilation of American stories, the American soul in story, speech, and song. And I've sort of been thinking ahead to 2026 and the 250th anniversary of this country. And that's what's drawing me, I think, to these kinds of books. And I feel that we're not doing a fantastic job of learning history in our education system. So I think that all of us can go back, whether you're a teenager or a parent or a grandparent, it's never too late to kind of dig into some of these stories. So I've just started this one. I got it for a couple of people for Christmas because I just could tell that it's the kind of book, Peggy said, you can leave it on your night table and read one of these stories and then pick it up later and read another one. So I recommend it, and I'm really enjoying it myself.
I'm going to get that for sure. Okay, this is the book I have for you to look forward to. You can pre-order it. I was able to get a galley copy. That's right before it goes to print. And Patty Callahan Henry, this is her new novel. It's called The Story She Left Behind. You will love this book because it takes place in the 50s in England. It's right after the war. And do you remember what was that show all of us watched?
Oh, All the Light You Can't See.
No, the Queen. No. It was with the...
The Crown?
The Crown, thank you. And do you remember the episode where you have the fog?
Yes.
Okay. There's a whole problem after World War II that there's a weather system plus all the coal that's being burned in London, and it turns into like this pea soup, a toxic pea soup, and thousands of people died. It was terrible. The book kind of starts there in a way, and they make their way up to the Lake District. Have you been to the Lake District in England? I'm sure you have.
No, actually, I really haven't.
Oh, this is where Beatrix Potter.
Yes, no, I would love to go there. This is not the Cotswolds.
So you. I can't believe you've never been there.
It's not the Cotswolds.
No, it's farther north. So when I lived in England with Peter, we lived about an hour and 20 minutes south of there. So we went there quite a bit, and it's where Beatrix Potter started her whole series of books and like making the little note cards and things. So it's a little bit historical fiction and a literary mystery about this woman who goes missing from America. And then her daughter is there. And it takes place in this beautiful scene during Christmas time. And this book is coming out in March, I believe, March and April. And she wrote The Secret Life of Flora Lee. And that was also a literary mystery based on a true story loosely. But Patty Callahan Henry is one of the best writers, and I've become friends with her. She actually used to live in South Carolina too, or she still has a house there. But she lives in Alabama. Great story about her. She was a nurse in real life. She was a nurse. And one day she was talking to her daughter. They were playing, and she asked her daughter what she thought she wanted to be when she grew up. And she said, I want to be a writer. And Patty thought, oh, so did I. And she hadn't fulfilled the dream. She started taking college courses at night for creative writing just to see if she could do it. And now she's the author of many books. She's the one who wrote Becoming Mrs. Lewis.
Yes.
Which is based on the story of the woman who married C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, I love that book.
So The Story She Left Behind.
You gave me that book.
Did I?
Yes.
No. Well, see, I feel like I'm curating for Martha. But we have similar tastes in books, and
that's great.
There's a lot. You know what? Except for First Lie Wins. And This Must Be the Place. They're all like historical fiction. Interesting.
Well, Dana, thank you so much. I hope that we have given everybody some ideas for the last people on your Christmas list and things that you might want to put away for yourself after the Christmas rush to curl up and read as we begin 2025. Dana, it's always a pleasure to get to spend some time with you and to talk about books. And we wish all of you Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. And thanks for tuning into The Untold Story. We look forward to bringing you much more in the new year.
Cheers.
You've been listening to The Untold Story with Martha McCallum. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Make sure to rate and review. For more podcasts, go to foxnewspodcast.com. Listen ad-free with the Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.